Let's jump right in. Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're looking into a genuinely chilling mystery. Just picture a world where every single one of your needs is met. No hunger, no thirst, zero disease, absolutely no danger, and perfect weather every single day. A literal utopia. Sounds pretty amazing, right? But what if I told you that in this perfectly engineered paradise, society completely collapsed in a wave of unimaginable horror and, well, apathy? We're setting the stage today for what might just be the most disturbing societal experiment ever run.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to start with the core question that absolutely obsessed an American ethologist named B Calhoun back in 1968. He basically spent 2 whole decades of his life chasing the answer to this one haunting thought. What actually happens to a society when nothing is hard anymore? You know, when scarcity and struggle are just completely gone? He decided to build a world with zero physical constraints, just to see what society would mutate into.
And the final result of that grand vision? Well, out of this perfectly designed, disease-free paradise, there were exactly 0 survivors. Yeah, you heard that right. 0. 5 years after the experiment kicked off, every single inhabitant was dead. And honestly, the wildest part is that not one of those deaths was caused by something a vet could have actually diagnosed. No virus, no starvation, no predators sneaking in. So how on earth do you get from a flawless utopia to total, literal extinction?
Part 1. A perfect mouse paradise. Let's head straight to the scene of the crime.
To figure out how this all went so wrong, we really need to investigate the flawless environment Calhoun built inside a federal research lab in Maryland. Just look at the absolute lack of physical threats here. For the 8 founding mice, Calhoun took 4 males and 4 females and dropped them into this massive 9-foot square enclosure. It was basically luxury real estate. It had these walk-up apartments stacked along the walls that they could reach through mesh tunnels. The climate was perfectly controlled, the nesting material super soft. The food hoppers literally never ran out, and the water bottles were always full. The whole place was meticulously cleaned on a strict schedule. He did the math and figured this space could comfortably hold about 3,800 mice. I mean, they were literally handed everything on a silver platter. Now, you're probably wondering why it's called Universe 25. Well, that's because Calhoun had already run this exact test 24 times before. He tried it in forests, in barns, in different lab rooms, and every single time the exact same fatal pattern popped up. So, number 25, this was designed to be the flawless, inarguable final answer. It was his masterpiece, a perfectly controlled experiment where no one could point fingers at the weather or a lack of food for what was about to go down. Part 2, the descent into madness. Let's see how this population explosion turns into an inescapable nightmare. If we track this timeline like a true crime narrative, you can see how a rapidly doubling population hit a terrifying breaking point right around day 315. See, for the first 104 days, things were totally chill. The mice were just learning the layout, settling into their new digs. But then the first litters were born, and the population started doubling every 55 days. Fast forward to day 315, and you've got over 600 mice packed inside. They're jostling for nesting space, basically piling on top of one another. And this exact moment, day 315, is when the tiny little cracks in their utopia blew wide open into massive fractures. The really crucial thing to grasp here is the contrast. In the wild, normal mouse society handles excess population by just leaving. The younger, surplus mice emigrate and find new territory. But Universe 25, it was a closed loop. There was no new ground to find. Young males would drift into the center of the enclosure and just form these listless, trapped pools of bodies. They had absolutely no fights to win, no territory to claim, and no females to court. They were perfectly healthy, well-fed, and just painfully, agonizingly bored. It got to the point where if a dominant mouse attacked one of these surplus guys, the victim wouldn't even fight back. He'd just take the hit, walk a few feet away, and lie right back down. This enforced crowding sparked something Calhoun termed the behavioral sink. It's this bizarre psychological shift where the mice completely lost their independent instincts. They were physically clumping together, but socially they were completely falling apart. For example, even though food was literally everywhere, the mice got so obsessively wired to the presence of others that they refused to eat alone. They'd aggressively crowd around just a handful of feeding stations, completely ignoring all the other perfectly good full food hoppers just a few feet away. Eventually, the entire social fabric just evaporated. Normal mouse behaviors were replaced by extreme apathy, random violence, and a totally horrifying breakdown of maternal instincts. Some males became totally checked out, while others went hyperactive, forcing their way into nests and completely ignoring normal courtship. The dominant males, they got so exhausted trying to patrol their overflowing turf that they just threw in the towel. Females who couldn't find a safe spot in the social hierarchy literally fled to the highest, most isolated apartments to live completely alone. But the most gut-wrenching detail is what happened to the mothers. Left all alone to defend their nests, they became so insanely stressed that they started abandoning their own pups. Some even forgot which babies were theirs. And in the absolute worst corners of the colony, they actually began attacking and eating their own offspring. Let's just sit with that devastating statistic for a second. In some sections, fewer than 1 in 20 newborn mice survived. That is less than a 5% survival rate for babies making it to weaning age. The colony was technically still breathing, but functionally, it was completely dead. The entire structure that kept them operating as a species had just dissolved into nothing. Part 3, the beautiful ones. This brings us right to the eerie climax of this societal collapse, and honestly, the weirdest suspects in our whole mystery. Calhoun called this new generation the beautiful ones. These were mice born straight into the chaos, and they looked perfectly healthy, but they completely opted out of being mice. Their nervous systems had developed in a world where there were literally no empty roles left to fill. Because they had no healthy model of a functioning life, they didn't even bother trying to participate in society. They never fought, so their fur was completely immaculate, completely unscarred. All they did was eat, sleep, and obsessively groom themselves. They'd wander through this incredibly crowded box, acting like they were completely alone in the world. Physically pristine, but entirely divorced from reality. As Calhoun profoundly noted, the first death was the spirit. The second was the body. The social extinction actually happened years before their physical bodies gave out to old age. Around day 560, the population maxed out at 2,200. And after day 920, not a single new mouse was born. Ever. The beautiful ones just kept grooming, the secluded females stayed completely hidden away, and the entire colony just aged in place until the very last mouse died in May of 1973. The spirit of the society died the moment they stopped functioning together. It just took the bodies a few more years to catch up. Part 4. The real cause of death. Now that we're at the autopsy of the experiment, we really need to clear up a massive historical misconception about what actually doomed Universe 25. For decades, everyone from politicians to urban planners pointed to this study to claim that comfort and abundance destroy a society, that a life without struggle inevitably kills itself. But actually, that is completely wrong. People looked at the beautiful ones and thought, oh, having it too easy makes you weak, and that's what ruins society. They used these mice as a warning about the decay of modern, comfortable human life. But they totally missed what Calhoun's actual data was screaming at them. If you look at Calhoun's own paper, the crucial takeaway is that the true killer wasn't the comfort at all. It was the complete eradication of purpose. I absolutely love this quote because it hits the nail right on the head. He realized that a collapse is totally logical when the number of individuals who can fill meaningful roles completely outnumbers the roles that actually exist. The food never ran out, the water never ran out. What ran out was something Calhoun didn't even think to put in the box to begin with: meaningful things to do. Here is the exact anatomy of the collapse. When the friction and the roles that make being alive matter disappear, society simply stops functioning. In a physical box, you can only have so many alphas, right? Only so many defenders, only so many mothers with safe territory. Once the sheer lack of physical space put a hard cap on the number of jobs, all the extra mice had nothing to inherit. The fundamental structure that gave them a reason to wake up and participate vanished. It wasn't the comfy nesting material that killed them, it was losing their place in the world. Parts 5. How we choose differently. Now, Calhoun wasn't some doomer. He actually spent the rest of his career trying to cure this specific type of collapse. Unlike mice trapped in a box, human beings have this incredible, unique ability to create infinite conceptual space. We can literally invent entirely new reasons to exist. Calhoun called this ideational generativity. It's a fancy term, but it basically means extending ourselves into networks, ideas, and roles that didn't exist yesterday. A mouse is completely bound by physical territory. But us? When our physical space gets crowded or automated, we just expand our minds. We invent new arts, new sciences, new online communities, totally new societal roles that our grandparents couldn't have even imagined. We aren't stuck inside the physical dimensions of a cage. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we look toward our own increasingly automated, high-comfort future. The mice in Universe 25 were handed a physical paradise, but they didn't have a choice. They couldn't create new roles, so they suffered an extinction of the spirit. What will we choose to build in ours? Because creating meaning isn't just a nice-to-have, it's quite literally the only way we survive. As we remove more and more physical friction from our daily lives, we have to remember the lesson of Universe 25. We have to keep inventing new reasons to be here. So what kind of meaning will you choose to build today? Thanks so much for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.